Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our look at painting Scinari Cathallar from the Lumineth Realm Lords. In the previous video, we worked on her dress, and in this video, we are going to work on the helmet bit and the belt thing and her chalice as well. To get us started, we are going to use some Ushabti bone. We're going to use a fairly generous amount of water to thin this color down, as this is a layer paint, and so it will require about 2 layers to get a nice, smooth, even coverage onto these areas. To get us started, we're simply going to apply this in the center portion of her belt, as well as the inside details of her headpiece, as it were. And on the chalice, it'll pretty much be on the base of the cup, as well as the main portion of the cup as well. As I'm working with this color, you may notice that I am applying it in a pretty much haphazardly fashion, again, for this first initial layer, but I do apply 2 layers for even coverage. Normally, I'm really kind of nitpicky about getting nice, smooth, even coverage on these things, and so I'm very mindful of my brush strokes, but because of how thin I have the paint and I'm initially working with it, I'm, just going to lay it down. And again, these details are quite small. Ethematic blue from Citadel Contrast with some contrast medium, about 2 drops of medium and 1 drop approximately of the contrast paint itself. And with this, I'm going to apply this pretty much to the entirety of each of those little bone segments that we have applied on the center of her belt, her headdress, and the back side of her headdress as well. There's the other opposite side of it. I don't think that was shown, but again, you can see I'm laying it on fairly generously initially, but as we go forward, I do wipe my brush off, clean it off really well, and then draw up most of that excess color that you see in those areas. You can see on the left-hand side how there's quite a bit of color in there, and you'll see here I'm just simply drawing the excess out so it's not too hilarious. I'm only looking for a slight shift in hue. I'm not looking to dramatically change the color there. Here on the chalice, I'm allowing some of it to reside around the piping in the details, as well as the base of the cup. Again, we're not really looking to push the color too deep, as we want most of that bone color to remain. You may notice too that because we're laying this really, really pale blue on top of this bone color, it's starting to look like the same value as the dress. And as you may recall, the dress was not painted in the same colors, but anybody who's played with colors before knows that obviously when you throw a blue on top of a yellowish tone, you're going to get a slightly green hue. And as you may notice, that it actually starts to look pretty similar. So anybody who wants to go about doing the dress in a similar fashion, by all means. Pure Ethematic Blue is next, and with this, it's straight out of the bottle. I'm being very deliberate as I apply this, and I'm going to apply this on the higher portions of each of the details. So I'm going to lay some of this down, and I thought about really kind of painstakingly feathering it out. If you want to go that route, by all means. I'm just doing this for demonstrative purposes and really kind of just, laying the color down and having fun with the model. If we were doing this for display or competition type standards, obviously we'd want to have a much smoother transition. But in fact, when you lay it down quite haphazardly, it will kind of move into the recesses as you want. You see there's kind of an abrupt line in the headpiece, and initially I was like, oh, well, I'll blend it out smoother, and then I thought, I'm not going to bother. So here you can see on the cup, I'm laying it on the higher portion, allowing that bone color to remain pretty much at that curvature, but where those little circular details, they almost look like gemstones on the cup itself. There's more color or more bone color remaining there as opposed to the higher portion at the lip of the cup. Around the piping around the cup as well, I also lay a little bit more of the color just to build intensity. That is really just for framing as opposed to the color remaining, as we are going to do something else on those details. So I really wasn't too concerned with it, and I figured we'll just frame those out just so it's easier to see everything. We're going to jump back into some Ushabti bone with some Screaming Skull. We're going to mix these approximately 1-to-1. I always say approximately because I'm drawing the paint from the paint pot using a brush, and I usually try to be consistent about how much paint I am drawing. I'm going to add a drop or two of Lumineth Medium to this, just to thin it out, just so it's nice and smooth. And also I can do a bit of glazing with it in this consistency. It's almost a 1-to-1 consistency, but it feels more like a 2-to-1 actually, which is the way it seems to flow. I may have not drawn as much paint as I thought I did, but that's not really a huge issue. And with this, I'm simply going to move the color back and forth. And in fact, I'm kind of doing a bit of a feathering here along the bottom portion of the headpiece. And with that, I kind of work the brush a little higher than normal, but that's okay because again, we're not working with a pure screaming skull where the value shift is going to be quite dramatic, and in fact we're going to get a slight gradient built up, and again it makes that previous layer of ethermatic blue kind of fade away, and that's kind of why I really wasn't worried about it, because I know that if you're going to work in multiple layers like this, that you can just simply lay more paint on top of each other in thin layers like this and do little glazes just to push your transitions a little further. Here on the cup itself, in those little facets inside, I'm basically laying more of this mixture at that curvature down towards where these little details kind of come to a point, bringing brightness to those areas. We're going to use a little bit of medium and a drop of Liquitex Flow Aid. We're going to take a little dollop of the paint that was the mixture and thin it way, way, way down. And we're basically, because we added the Flow Aid, we're kind of creating a shade wash. And with this, all I want is just this to remain within the bottom recesses of those details. That's all I'm doing here. This step really isn't entirely necessary, but I just wanted to fill in those details and creep within those recesses, just like how we get like regular with shade wash. But I also use it to just kind of refine the glaze and just kind of even out the transition of color. I did not want the chalice to be really dramatic as far as how much green we're seeing. Again, it's kind of, it's a bit of an oxidization type of look, but it'll make more sense when we start laying down other colors on these details. And again, you can see I'm just simply laying this down, and then of course I just feather it out ever so slightly just to kind of, blend out the transition of color as it were. Finally, we're going to come in with some Screaming Skull. We're going to just slap a little bit onto our palette. Really just the dampness of the brush to thin the color out ever so slightly. And then very carefully, we're just going to pick out the bottom portions of the details that we have been working on. It's really just a little bit of color, just like at the very points on the headpiece. I think it's just in the middle center area that I lay a majority of this color down. And really I'm laying it on kind of the piping on, or the scroll work, as it were, on that headpiece. On the cup, it's pretty much just at that bend where those little gemstone details are, and pretty much working towards the pointy bit of that, each of those little facets. I also lay a little bit of color. You'll see like there's a bit of a triangular shape. I also lay color in there as well. And of course, the base of the cup also gets a highlight closest to the handle, as it were. And again, we get that nice little gradient of color. Next, we're going to jump to some Warp Lock Bronze. We're going to slap a little bit onto the palette. We're just going to use a little bit of Lumineth Medium just to thin this color down. Really working with the color in this fashion is just so that we can remain accurate. As we lay the color down, you'll see that quite a bit of the primer does show through the color. That is fine because we are going to apply more than one layer. In fact, I think to get even coverage on here, I lay about less than 4 layers. It's about 3.5, maybe closer to 3. It really wasn't that many layers. This first initial layer was just applied just to be, so that I had control over where I was laying the color. And that was really just the main point of thinning down with the mediums. Again, when we are working around the other details, again, you can see how the primer is showing through and the coverage looks kind of splotchy. But that's because obviously it's been thinned out, and of course it is a darker color sitting on top of a very light prime, as this is a white primer, and that is pretty much just going to become very apparent. But once we lay multiple layers down, it becomes very, very solid, as any color does, any opaque color will. Here you'll notice that as I catch the raised portions of this inner detail, I've turned the brush 180 degrees in the paint and then flipped it over and turned it another 180 degrees to make a chisel shape. And I use that flat shape to catch those raised portions of the that headpiece. Here on the chalice, I simply just apply this warp lock bronze all over even the little, it's like little gemstones or, I don't know, some sort of stones class, whatever it is, inside that chalice. And I basically base coat the entirety of these details on this high portion here. And then I begin to work along the rim of the base of the cup and the very underside of that detail as well. And then, of course, I also work on the edge of the chalice and the piping running around the bottom of that chalice, as you'll see there. I didn't bother showing that because it was kind of just funny camera angles, and it didn't look very good. My hand was all in the way. Warplock Bronze and Screaming Bell are next. With this deep dark color, we're going to apply it in a 1-to-1 mix ratio. I'm also going to add a drop of medium to this just to thin it out a little bit. We're not looking to break this down like we did with the previous Warplock Bronze so that we could lay down, very controlled layers. I just wanted it thinned out so that we could move it along fairly smoothly along these surfaces. And I'm just bringing the brightness of the metallic down one facet. Now the little arms that come off her belt, they have like a facet on them like a sword, and so one side I bring the color down towards the point, and on the other side of the facet I bring it up towards her hip. An aesthetics choice, kind of like a non-metallic, true metallic type of fashion where, obviously we have that mixture of light getting brighter on different facets of the detail, as it were. I also catch the little clasps and such. And really what we're going for here is more of a copper look. The bronze is a mixture of copper and zinc and tin or something like that. So, it's not out of the ordinary to use this deep dark color here to represent what we want for the metallic. And with the elves, I often like doing things a little bit different. And of course, it gives you a little bit of liberty to have a little bit of fun with color schemes. And so when you're working with this model, why not play with color, have a little bit of fun? Metals don't have to look like metals. You can paint them whatever colors you like. Don't constrain yourself to what something should be as far as, what you see it normally or anything like that. It's just, they're your models. You can paint them up however you like. As we work our way around the piping, again, it's pretty much at the bend where at that curvature where I'm placing these highlights. On the rim of the chalice, I place it along the outer rim, but on where the piping is, I place it right at the curvature. We're coming in with pure Screaming Bell next. We're going to add a drop of medium here just to thin it down. Now you will notice that I am using Lamian medium to thin these colors down. Just really for ease of use. I could just as easily use water to thin these colors down, although I do find that when we are working with metallics, especially when we want to work with them in a thin consistency, I often prefer to work with mediums as opposed to water, as I just find the flakes that make up the pigment of the paint itself begin to behave differently, and I don't care for that aspect of it. And so I like to maintain a lot of control over metallics when working with them in this fashion, in a nice thinned out consistency, because when you are working with them in a thin consistency, you can pretty much do kind of like a glazing type of thing where you can slowly build gradients of color on a surface. And so that's really one of the first things you discover as you move into other techniques such as glazing and blends and what have yous. You may notice that as I'm laying these brighter colors down, it's kind of mirroring what we had done with the previous color, where we're building the color up from the bottom up. And here in the high point, in the central high point of the headdress or headpiece, whatever it is, I'm just doing a slight little bit of edging along some of the details just to really kind of bring them forward. And really, I was enjoying how nice and dark it went to this nice bright kind of copper look. And it really kind of brings out all these fun little details as you see. And again, it's a nice contrast with how light the model is going to be when we're all said and done. Hachette Copper is next with a drop of medium. Surprise, surprise, just one drop. pretty much a 1-to-1 mix ratio, just really to thin the color down. And again, because we're working with this color in a thinned out consistency, we can control it and create slight little gradients of color and build to our intensity. Now, I do not lay a lot of this color down, and you can see I'm just going for just bright corners and ends of details just to bring forward the brightness. And of course, we could push that further by adding a little bit of silver to this mixture and, do another highlight, but I don't think I bother doing that. It all depends. Once everything else starts to get done on this model, I may make changes here and there, but I was kind of digging how this contrast was working for me as far as the really light green with this very reddish tone, very warm tone of the metallic color. And so that was really a lot of fun as far as bringing this together. Of course, you may have guessed what color like the veil may be, and of course the base, given that we're working with such a contrast here on the model. And again, it's pretty straightforward laying these edges down. It's really nothing terribly complex. I think it's just a little fun little look to the model. But there it is. That's the belt, headpiece, and chalice. The bronze details of these models are all done, and we can move on to working on that veil next. Big thank you to my patrons. Without their support, these videos would not be possible. If you're considering Patreon support, click the link in the description below. You'll be taken off to a magical website called Patreon, where there are varying tiers of support, and a huge, huge thank you to everybody who does. Take care of those brushes, and they will take care of you.